Could chain migration cost President Trump the election? Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the effects in 2020 of chain migration or family preferences-based immigration. This is where if you're a citizen or a lawful permanent resident, relatives of yours from overseas, whether it's your spouse or your kids, etc., are allowed to move to the United States on an expedited basis. And this forms a significant percentage of U.S. immigration. And it turns out that 20% of all legal immigration is from Mexico, even though they only constitute about 2% of the world's population. And so clearly, a lot of the immigration coming to the United States is disproportionately coming from Mexico. And almost 90% of that is family preferences-based immigration. So almost all of it is chain migration. And this is impacting not only the amount of people that are coming to the United States, but also, I think, the political composition. Latinos in 2016 exit polls, they voted for Hillary Clinton by a 2-to-1 margin. And I think that that could come into play in 2020 or 2024 or just in future election cycles. And it may happen this year or it could, may meet the next cycle. We'll see when we get to November. But from 1888 all the way until 1996, an uninterrupted period of 108 years, U.S. presidents who won the election had also won the popular vote. So they won the popular vote and the Electoral College. And then Republicans began to lose their edge in about the year 2000, where George W. Bush and then Donald Trump did not get the popular vote, but they did win the Electoral College. And only narrowly, though, because a lot of the margin in terms of the votes in these states in Florida was really narrow. And in 2016, there was just tens of thousands of votes that separated President Trump from being president or Hillary Clinton being president. And I think that the narrower edge that Republicans tend to win elections, particularly in their first terms in the 21st century, could have a lot to do with chain migration stemming from the 1986 illegal immigration amnesty that was signed into law by former president, the late President Ronald Reagan. And again, 2020 could potentially produce precisely the same outcome where if Trump wins, he could be, winning, but with not winning the popular vote. This is the latest IBD TIPP poll. It shows Joe Biden with a 48.5% lead over President Trump, 46% in the popular vote. And that's about what President Trump did in 2016. Hillary Clinton got 48.2% of the vote, and President Trump got 46.1%. So this actually kind of mirrors what we saw in 2016, what we're seeing now in 2020. So this could be an identical election. It's going to be really, really close, though. If that's the real margin, then yeah, President Trump would win 46% of the popular vote. No problem. I mean, he won a pretty sizable electoral college majority when you look at it. 304 electoral college votes to 227 for Hillary Clinton. So I think that's a pretty decent margin, and he's looking to improve upon that this year, and we'll see if he is able to improve on that. I think that the issue, though, with the popular vote is so pronounced that my former professor at Stony Brook University, Helmut Norpoth, he's abandoned the popular vote in his own predictive model, looking at primary performance in the New Hampshire and South Carolina primaries and where you are in the electoral cycle. He picked President Trump was going to win in 2016 based upon his performance in the primaries versus Hillary Clinton, and the fact that Democrats were competing for their third term in a row in the White House and Republicans were trying to oust the Democrats. And so that favors Republicans in that cycle. If President Trump wins re-election, then the cycle will swing back to favor Democrats in 2024. But in 2020, Professor Norpoth is projecting that President Trump has a 91% chance of winning the election. And he switched from the popular vote. He used to use the popular vote, but he kind of got burnt in 2000. He thought Al Gore was going to win the popular vote, and he did, but Al Gore didn't win the election, so the popular vote was not predicting the winner. And the point of the predictive model is to tell you who's going to be the next president. And then in 2016, he said that President Trump was going to win the popular vote and the Electoral College, but Trump didn't win the popular vote, but he did win the Electoral College. And so now he's switched to the Electoral College for the predictive model, and he projects that President Trump could actually get 362 Electoral College votes versus Joe Biden Biden only getting 176. And that would be a veritable landslide. And he says, 9 out of 10 chances he's going to win the election very, very overwhelmingly. In 2016, when polls, pundits, and forecasters were all predicting a certain victory for Hillary Clinton, the primary model was practically alone in predicting Donald Trump's victory, and did so as early as March 7th of that year, putting his chance of winning at 87%. So we'll see. Is President Trump's performance? He overwhelmingly won the primaries in 2020. He ran relatively unopposed. Joe Biden, he lost the New Hampshire primary, and he didn't start winning primaries until South Carolina. And so because of his weak performance, that could mean that on the margins, many Democrats are going to actually vote for President Trump or just stay home because Joe Biden doesn't inspire enthusiasm. And you can see that at his rallies, for example, anecdotally, that people are just not excited about Joe Biden as a candidate. Now, introduced in 1996, this model predicts, again, Trump's probably going to win, according to Professor Neuropath. But because he abandoned the popular vote, though, I think he's starting to lean towards the idea that maybe Republicans are not as numerous as Democrats, and you have to account for that in the model. And so Republicans can win, but they have to win with the Electoral College. They're not going to get a popular vote total. How long can that go on, that Republicans are going to keep on winning the Electoral College, but not the popular vote? I would say if the Democrats' numbers keep growing, not for too much longer. And why are Democrats more numerous? The problem for the GOP is largely confined to blue states. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 61% to 31% and 59% to 36% in California and New York, respectively. That was almost a 6 million vote margin, 4 million in California and almost 2 million in New York. And the biggest reason I say is chain migration. If you look at the numbers of people coming in on the statistics from the Department of Homeland Security, the Yearbook of Immigration Statistics, you'll find that overwhelmingly people are coming from Mexico, and it's stemming from the 1986 amnesty, where out of 32.6 million immigrants from 1986 to 2018, 6.4 million, or about 20%, were from Mexico alone. Put another way, that comprises the country, less than 2% of the population of the world, but it makes up 1/5 of all U.S. immigration. Nearly all of that, again, is the 1986 amnesty and the family-based preferences. And when you look at the family-based preferences, you find that almost all of the immigration from Mexico is that. 161,858 came from Mexico in 2018, 105,539 were family-based preferences, and so was 36,276. And so that adds up to 87% of Mexican immigrants are family preferences. And now another 1.1 million Mexicans are in the current family waiting list, and 1.2 million overall. Some of them are going for employer preferences, but 1.2 million Mexicans are in the waiting list, and that makes up 1/3 of the waiting list of people who are basically eligible to come here, and of the worldwide total of 3.6 million. Family first preference, 41.7% of the applicants, people in the waiting list, are Mexico. Family second preference, 31% are Mexican of the entire waiting list. Family third preference, 31.5% are from Mexico. And family fourth preference, 33.6% are from Mexico alone. So 1/3 of everyone on the waiting list is going to be from Mexico. That's the next crop of immigrants, legal immigrants, that are going to come to the United States. And all of this, again, this is not even accounting for how many Mexicans will join the franchise via illegal immigration. So if you emigrate here illegally, but you marry into the franchise, that's a way to become a citizen. And then they might find themselves on the family preferences list. And so, but it's technically illegal, though. If you marry a foreigner and then you want your spouse to come to the United States, U.S. law says they are going to be allowed to be going on the waiting list, and they're going to get here eventually. But when you look at the 2016 exit poll from CNN, Latinos voted for Hillary Clinton by a 2-to-1 margin, 66% to 28%. So if you factor that into the amount of people coming from Mexico alone, I think that favors Democrats, frankly, in the popular vote and eventually in electoral college. And you don't need a mathematics degree to figure this out. It's all baked into the cake. Barring a sudden Republican baby boom or offsetting mass immigration from other parts of the world, other countries perhaps, that would be more likely to vote Republican, I think the danger is that America very soon will become just like California with Democratic one-party rule. It's pretty much inevitable. I think that these trends are overwhelming. There's not an offsetting baby boom, and there's not offsetting mass immigration when 1/3 of the people in the waiting list to get into the United States are from Mexico alone. I think the problem will only become more pronounced as immigration trends downward from other parts of the world. In 2016, President Trump ran on a platform of building a southern border wall, halting illegal immigration, ending catch and release, and moving to a merit-based system. And on those first 2 or 3 planks there, dealing with the illegal immigration crisis, he's been very, very successful. 450 miles of wall will be completed by the end of 2020, the Army Corps of Engineers reports. And deportations and removals are way up, coming from the 2019 migrant caravan that was coming in here. You had a lot of people who were apprehended and then are being deported, and that number is as high as it's been in many, many years. But a deal on legal immigration reform has eluded President Trump. Now, legislation by former U.S. Representative Bob Goodlatte, back in 2018, he was the House Judiciary Committee chairman at the time. It was the Goodlatte-McCall bill. It would have ended chain migration, the visa lottery, built a wall, defunded sanctuary cities, and put in place E-Verify. But it didn't garner any bipartisan support, so it wasn't going to be able to overcome a Senate filibuster, which there's little incentive for Democrats to give anything on this issue, unfortunately. And should Trump get reelected in November, he'll have a very narrow window, I believe, to address legal immigration reform. If you want to deal with chain migration, or you want to have different quotas from different countries, or whatever new system that he wants to move towards, he's going to need to do that in 2021 and 2022 before the midterms, assuming he can even get back the House, because I don't think Nancy Pelosi is going to want to deal with him on this issue. In the meantime, the Supreme Court's going to be addressing 2 cases, including Trump's Remain in Mexico policy. This is where Mexico agrees to detain people pending hearings upon their entry into the United States when they're coming here illegally, but they may be claiming refugee status. And so we want to adjudicate those claims and not have people basically disappearing pending their hearing. So if they remain in Mexico, they come here, if they qualify for asylum and refugee status, they can come in. But otherwise, they have to go back home. The Supreme Court's going to hear that case. I think he'll do well. I mean, with Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, the odds of Trump getting favorable rulings in these cases is probably going to go up. I think it's a fair reading of the law to say that you can have Remain in Mexico, you can have U.S. to Mexico relations, and this is, the president dealing with the president of Mexico and coming to an agreement between the Departments of Homeland Security and their own immigration officials. And I think that, he has a good odds there. The Supreme Court will also tee up a census case on whether Trump can exclude undocumented immigrants from the census count and to do with apportionment. And I think that's another critical ruling. So you have a lot that's happening with immigration. The wall's being completed. These Supreme Court cases are coming up. And the issue of chain migration, it could overwhelm Republicans in future election cycles if it's not dealt with, and you have a more equitable, frankly, fair solution on immigration that's not going to favor one political party over the other. We don't want one-party rule. We're not a banana republic. We want to have competitive elections between 2 parties who can hold one another accountable. If it turns out like California, there won't be any accountability, and I don't think the American people support that by and large. And I'll leave you with the close here. The question Republican lawmakers need to ask themselves is simple. How many more elections does the GOP expect to win without the popular vote? 2020 could be the last one if 2016 wasn't already. That's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.